you everyone for tuning in and welcome back to another university segment of our REIMAGINE 2020 virtual conference series. This is version 2, Disrupting the System, and I'm your co-host, Ashlie Meredith, Head of Education at the MouseBelt Blockchain Accelerator. And today I'm interviewing a returning guest, Gilberto Guadiana, and he's over at Northwestern University, the president of the Blockchain Club there. So anyone who missed it last time, we did interviews with student groups all over the world. Check out our YouTube channel and watch some of our university interviews. Gilberto, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Ashley. Thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, so last time we talked, it was about 3 months ago now. We were just kind of responding to all the shelter-in-place orders, and students were having to come home from school, and we wanted to check in with you and see how what was the state of blockchain education out in Chicago at Northwestern. And so this time I wanted to invite you back individually and just dive in deeper to some of your projects or just check in first about fall semester. Are you headed back to campus? What's the situation at Northwestern?
Yeah, so in like 10 days, about 2 weeks, I'll be heading back to campus. It's kind of like 1/4 of the students are heading back. And, there's a lot of regulations about what you can and can't do on campus just to kind of manage the spread of the disease, right? I'm not sure if campus is going to stay open, but I'm hoping it is because I'm heading back.
Okay, so they gave students a choice whether they wanted to do in-person classes or not?
Yeah. So everything you can do online, but there's like a hybrid component where it's kind of like some in-person meetings, which are optional to go to. And I just wanted to go back to get some face-to-face interaction. I like meeting with my professors and being with students, and it's just kind of like a learning environment that I really missed when I was, working from home in the spring.
Yeah, we talked with another school, Fordham, and in New York, and they are doing hybrid flexible as well. And this is a term that I hadn't really come across until all of this, but apparently has been a type of course for a long time at many institutions. We're kind of exploring this hybrid flexible model where you kind of have to create courses that can be done both online and in person. And I think that students, choose whether they come into class or not. So about 25% of Northwestern students are headed back to campus in 10 days.
Something like that.
Well, excellent. Well, I hope everybody stays safe and is able to get the most out of their learning experiences this semester. Speaking of coming back to campus or not, and what you can and can't do on campus, what are the plans for Northwestern's Blockchain Club this semester?
Yeah, so we really had to kind of pivot our focus. We really decided to focus more on projects. Before, we had a lot of speaker events and we had in-person meetings, and that really had to kind of change. Just we really wanted to be accessible to everyone, no matter what time zone they're in. So yeah, basically projects that we can work together on with Zoom calls or different meetings that we can have online that isn't really too impacted by where we are is something that we had to really move towards. One thing that we had to kind of like scrap is we were thinking about buying some mining hardware just to see how it works and kind of look at that in person and kind of set up the system. I don't think we're going to do that anymore, but yeah, really shifting towards projects that kind of give people a chance to work independently, but also come together as a group and work towards putting something together.
So kind of moving more to asynchronous communication, maybe, where you can work on a project and check in any time of day in a way that most like remote first companies are doing it.
Yeah. So like asynchronous, a lot of like group chat messages, but we're trying, if possible, to have like a weekly group meeting that works for everyone's schedules. So far, most of the club is either based in U.S. time zones or kind of like China's time zone. So it hasn't been too bad. We'll do more late morning or late night, but yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, now that we have new members coming in once the school year starts, maybe we'll have people from Europe, or maybe we'll have other time zones that we really need to consider when trying to schedule these meetings. And we might have to, like you mentioned, just have more asynchronous communication, or even subdivide the groups into separate meetings just to kind of make it work logistically.
That is actually something I've been hearing from more and more students, is this idea of having smaller groups that can engage better on a Zoom call than, like, some of these clubs have 30, 50 members, and maybe it makes more sense to have smaller groups meeting to work on specific projects, or if it's the marketing team, or it's all focused on education or actually building stuff. So I think that's great. And I think it probably is the way forward. And I'm looking forward to having more topical meetings at MouseBelt University, themes, guest speakers, and maybe even some work groups, especially around educational technology. That's a kind of pet passion of mine, and it's coming up more and more in the blockchain space and in the world, with virtual educational experiences, how to build technology that can really help us have the best kinds of learning experiences. So just a little plug for MouseBelt University there. We're going to be doing weekly debates and speakers from our Blockchain Education Alliance. So if any student clubs out there are thinking, we used to plan a lot of speaker events, you can just start tuning into ours and continue your club operations maybe a little more asynchronously.
Nice.
So speaking of the projects you guys have just decided to start focusing on, wanted to invite you here to dive in deeper to some of those projects. One is a paper that you wrote called "The Current State of Academic Blockchain Solutions in Supply Chain Management." And so you're trying to understand what the role of academics is in enterprise blockchain. So what are the types of projects that you saw that exist in supply chain management?
Yeah, so we're really focused on what solutions are being proposed by academics. And really the thing that really stuck out was the majority of these papers and solutions that were being presented really focused on tracking and tracing. Because of blockchain's characteristics, like being append-only, immutable, it really enabled, at least for supply chains, a way to track lots of products, or a way to track individual products and make sure to see where they're going and what to do with them. And so one thing that really stood out was, for example, it's easily seen by IBM's Food Trust, tracking and tracing of food, and that can really help with recalls. Like, let's say a farm has salmonella, then they can just recall those individual products and not have to scrap everything. So that can be cost effective. Another thing was big in pharmaceutical industry was the role of stopping counterfeit medicines from getting into the supply chain. And again, that really related to the tracking and tracing, because if you see unknown products that are trying to be introduced, you can just not let them in. And of course, both of these solutions aren't perfect, but hopefully they can at least reduce some of the counterfeit products, and they can minimize some of the costs associated with the recalls. And I think those are two pretty interesting ones. Another one that was pretty interesting, or something interesting to note, was the role of Internet of Things technology that were being used for quality assurance. So something like maybe you have very expensive products that need to be kept at a certain temperature range or a certain pressure. If you have these sensors there, then you can kind of have some real-time assurance that these products are being maintained at a certain level of quality, and that can really help out. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely love to plug, another interview of the Reimagine 2020 conference series. Check out our YouTube interviews with industry leaders from IoTeX or IoTeX. So they're building blockchain-enabled private and secure sensors that have, GPS, temperature, all of those different things. RFID tracking software. It was our first startup at MouseBelt. So we're really interested in hardware and how that can be attached to blockchain. We also did an interview with Dr. Mo Sadogi at UC Davis, and he's working on applications of microcomputing when you have like thousands of devices that are all trying to interact with a blockchain. So I definitely want to recommend people go check out those interviews as well. So looking at your report, you see what the standard blockchain solutions for enterprise that most people probably think about, agriculture, track and trace. Were there any papers or explorations into use cases that surprised you?
Yeah. I think one that was pretty interesting was the role of inventory management on the blockchain for loans, so business to business loans. So, for example, a supplier will give a loan to a retailer, and that loan won't be paid back until a certain number of product is sold. And so the blockchain, like I mentioned, is tracking and tracing these products and tracking and tracing these sales and the complex business logic that are built into the smart contract are able to assure payment, make sure it goes through, and in some cases even have a complicated, not complicated, a way to dispute certain transactions. Since blockchains are append only, businesses have to have some way to have dispute processes. And yeah, that's something that I hadn't really seen before, some type of dispute process. So for example, you think about like a multi-signature wallet, you need a certain number of signatures for a transaction to fully go through. You can kind of have that as well. Make sure that there's like a certain period to make sure that there's no disputes or anything like that. And if there's no disputes, then the transaction will go forward. And that was an interesting concept that I hadn't really thought about for business transactions on the blockchain.
So, what was the ultimate goal of this report? What are you going to do with it next?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal was just kind of trying to see, okay, where are we at? One thing that we really focused on was, okay, what's the degree of technological implementation that these solutions are at? And so what I thought I would see more of was a lot of like proof of concepts, a lot of working solutions, but there's really a disconnect between academia and enterprise. So there's not too many partnerships where I didn't see too many papers that talked about, okay, this is a working system, we've tested it already. Instead, it was kind of more like in-house testing of the systems themselves, kind of looking at more quantitative metrics like transaction per second, latency. But it wasn't really, I didn't really see too much uh, of it actually being implemented in real world systems. And so another thing was just kind of trying to figure out, okay, what are some of the gaps in some of these solutions and where are they? So one thing that we really wanted to focus on was, for example, okay, so let's assume that blockchains are amazing and they actually are 100% immutable. Let's pretend. Uh, Something that we really didn't find is a lot of focus on the quality of the data that's being input into the blockchain. And so you could have the best immutable blockchain in the world, but garbage in, garbage out. And that's something that we really focused on, was giving potential suggestions for researchers to focus on. Another thing was the concept of economic models for really measuring and making sure we track economic and social models for tracking the value that these blockchain systems have, because it can be easy for companies or researchers to say, okay, let's replace these legacy systems with the blockchain because it's transparent, or it's gonna remove the need for trust and it's gonna be better for your supply chain. But for example, one thing that was interesting to find is that a lot of consumers don't care if you have a barcode that says, oh, this is actually a certified product. Like, most people don't want to pay extra for that. And that needs to be taken into account when proposing to replace legacy systems.
Yeah. Is this a cost saving measure or a social good measure? Is one thing that I've talked about with other interviewees about for a lot of these solutions, the argument for why a company should adopt it might not be that it's going to help their bottom line. It may be a more ethical choice or something like that. So it's really interesting what you're saying about this lack of collaboration between the academy and industry. So the technological implementations of some of these explorations, you said, were happening in-house. You mean in-house at the university's labs?
Yeah, that's right. Or sometimes like they would rent out spaces. For example, I saw one paper that rented out a company's warehouse and used some of their product to they themselves actually test the processes, but they weren't actually helping like the day-to-day operations of the companies themselves. And so a lot of what they were proposing, I don't know if it's going to work or not, because the devil's in the details, and you need to figure out, okay, what are some of the challenges that are going to come up when you actually try to implement this in real life.
Is part of the problem, like, you can't truly test a blockchain solution until you have that amount of data where you have like thousands of transactions happening a day, tracing, an item from one country to another. So you actually need the mass, the critical mass of like an actual enterprise and enterprise operation to test these systems.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what solution you're pitching. What I saw a lot of was a lot of like hand wavy, uh, really concepts that were being put that were kind of like, oh, we're not addressing this certain aspect of the system because it's going to change for every company that adopts it. And so it's kind of a cop out sometimes, where you're neglecting, the pain points of the system just because you're not too sure what it would look like for individual companies. I didn't see enough case studies or proof of concepts that would really like give insight into, okay, does this actually work or does it not? And so that's why I saw a lot of like conceptual papers that we had to filter out, just because for me, I want to look at those pain points. I want to know what value is provided. I want to know what the issues are if someone's actually going to use these systems.
What do you think the message would be to enterprise innovation teams or blockchain teams who might be exploring blockchain solutions? We have the Blockchain Education Alliance, and we've, through our years of working in development and investing, have made relationships with different companies in the blockchain space and beyond, and have invited them, identify that they care about educating students, and they want to do cool stuff, and they want to they want to do hackathons and see if people can build solutions on their protocol or for their product. And so we just brought on some enterprise companies as well. So AB InBev, Anheuser-Busch, one of the largest beverage distributors in the world, Rolls-Royce, ING Bank. So these non-blockchain companies that have been exploring blockchain proofs of concept for the last 5 years or so, what would be the message to them about the need for their support, or if there's a lot of interest? It seems like there's plenty of people writing about this stuff, and they're looking for collaborators.
Yeah. So what I would recommend, well, let's talk about small and medium enterprises for just to begin. These companies may not have the resources for research and development into systems that may or may not help their bottom line, or may not give value to them. So what I would say for them is, if they're really thinking about bringing a blockchain system in, either you're going to need to pick a platform that's kind of like that you can use out of the box, that you don't have to really modify too much. One that comes to mind is something like multi-chain, which can be easily, I'm not sure how easily, but it can really work out of the box with those parameters that you choose. So that could be one way to like cut costs and try to not spend too much on developers. But if you really want to interface with academics, I mean, you'll need to, if you're a small, medium enterprise, I think the best bet is just read some of these papers, see some of the proposals, because all these researchers, the majority of them are giving their solution proposals, and they're looking like they write in their conclusions, we want to test this further. And so these researchers already have the willingness to work on these systems. So what I would recommend is that these small and medium enterprises really read and try to find a good fit for which of these solution proposals may actually be viable for them. And then just kind of reach out to the researchers and see, okay, we're willing to work with you on this. I think just being willing to be part of the project, it's going to really bring a lot of attention. I think a lot of researchers would be willing to do that.
Awesome. And then for large enterprises who do have money to experiment.
Yeah, so like something like Hyperledger Sawtooth, like maybe if you have a lot more resources, then you can use some of the benefits that a platform like that may offer. But that comes at the trade-off of needing more resources. If you're a large enterprise, maybe you have millions of dollars to do this research. Maybe you have the ability to get contractors that really focus on these chains. But if you don't, then I would just recommend directly interfacing with researchers. I mean, if you're a large company, you may not even need researchers to have a working solution. It would be nice to get some theoretical backing to it, but if it works, it works.
Excellent. Well, really looking forward to some of our meetings we have coming up with the Blockchain Education Alliance, and I'll be sure to invite you and you can present some of your findings to them and really implore them. Like, there's researchers who are ready to test some of these out, and they just need the support.
Sounds good.
And there's another project that you are working on. I know last time we spoke, there's a lot of interest in healthcare applications for blockchain in the Chicago area and all the universities there. I'm sure there's, really great medical schools, and we talked a bit about that in our last interview. But what are some updates on some of the healthcare blockchain research you've been doing?
Yeah. So ever since we spoke, what was it, 3 months ago, we really continued on this project. And like I mentioned before, so this project was all about exploring what would it mean to actually implement product management backed by blockchain into existing companies. And so the way we did that was kind of we looked at a specific dApp. In our case, we looked at Colony that's built on Ethereum as it's essentially a decentralized autonomous organization, but we were kind of trying to see, okay, would it actually work in a clinical setting, one which has rigid processes, rigid kind of like formalized steps that the systems could use. And so what we ended up doing is we kept exploring that project. We kept beta testing ourselves. We didn't get to the point where we started working with companies themselves, just because it's pretty hard to get, the confidential data of what they're working on these clinical projects. Yeah, I think that'd be hard to do. But what we did do was we actually had an expert interview. Our project mentor, Abigail Cyrus from IBM, really connected us with a fantastic expert in the living sciences industry, who really let us know, okay, are these potential value adds that we came up with actually going to help companies? And it turned out not really. So you have to remember that these blockchain solutions have to compete with legacy systems, which aren't burdened by some of the technical barriers that blockchains are faced with, like scalability and speed and efficiency and cost. And yeah, we were trying to use this particular dApp to see, okay, could we replace or add to existing product management software? And the space is immature. It still needs a lot of work, a lot of development that needs to work. I mean, right now, I'm not sure if the dApp is even 100% secure. I'm not too sure. I haven't looked at the code myself. So even assuming if it's working great, assuming that the blockchain works great, it just doesn't have enough functionality. And so we were able to kind of extend that reasoning to the space as a whole, and kind of take a look at, okay, what's the status of these solutions, which ones could actually be implemented into enterprise. So we kind of got a little bit more insight about enterprise blockchain as a whole. And as it stands, it's shaky, but there's a lot of improvements that are occurring. And what we noticed was that if you try to retrofit a solution into like an enterprise context, you're going to have a hard time. That's kind of what we figured out. You really need to custom make these things for the individual organizations. And using a public decentralized app built on Ethereum that wasn't specifically designed for your use case may not be viable, because they weren't looking into the specific trade-offs that are needed for certain situations, for certain scenarios. And we actually just finished this project. We published our article yesterday, actually, on Medium, and we kind of wrapped up the product. Now we're just finalizing, thanking our mentor. We need to thank Abigail.
Yes, so we'll have to share that article in the show notes on YouTube so everyone can check it out. It's on medium.com, and it's called Assessing Blockchain Potential in Clinical Research Project Management Through the Colony dApp.
That's right.
And it sounds like your conclusion was that if they're not custom built for the specific use case, it's really hard to show that any particular dApp would have enough benefit to justify the whole switch over and the cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, for companies, yeah.
Well, great information to share with our listeners and all of our enterprise companies listening in. I feel like as more researchers like yourself look into all these different applications of blockchain, they can really get a better idea of how to go about it. Whether to work with researchers or not, whether they need a custom product or not. So all great information. And just to wrap up then, last conference we came up with the reimagine theme. We saw all of these event cancellations as a chance to pause and reflect and reimagine what the rest of the year might look like. And I think since then we've just seen a lot of our systems failing, failed responses to global health crisis, economic crisis, political strife, and we wanted to talk about disrupting those systems and ask you, what blockchain use cases are you most excited about, or which ones do you think have the most potential to really change our system?
Yeah. So this kind of leads me into a project that we're just starting out in the club. So what we're looking at right now is using an off-chain solution like interplanetary file systems to store data publicly. And so that kind of ties into like this idea of censorship. So at least for American politics, where it's very divisive, very polarizing, and it can be hard to voice different opinions. And the fear of censorship is real. Something like if you post on Twitter, that could be removed. But you can just imagine if you have a social media platform that people are actually using that doesn't necessarily have as much censorship, then you can be more confident in posting your opinions. And so, yeah, I think we need a little bit more disruption in the social media space, just so that we can get more opinions out there. It's kind of concerning when you see headlines that say, "Oh, most Americans are afraid to speak their mind," or they're afraid of cancel culture and that kind of a thing. And it's I think there's a lot of opportunity for more increased dialogues towards through these blockchain-enabled systems. I think that might be a area of promise.
Yeah, that's something I've always tried to pay attention to, the projects in the space. My favorite projects are those that, enhance our ability to exercise freedom of speech, anti-censorship, paying people for content that they create, letting people own their data and the things that they create, and fair journalism. So those are always my favorite projects. I'm interested to see how, maybe Voice does, or how Steemit will continue. And yeah, a Web 3.0 version of social media that's censorship resistant and allows us to have fair, free journalism.
Yeah, and yeah, also on a more traditional note, if you think about like Bitcoin or finance or that kind of a thing, I'd like to see more tools that actually allow you to that allow like the layman, the ordinary person, actually become their own bank. Because right now, if I canceled my checkings account and moved all my assets to Bitcoin, I'm gonna have a hard time, transacting at the supermarket or anything like that, or even peer to peer. Yeah, so that's something that I would like to look into as well. I mean, we've all been pushing towards disruption in finance, but can the average person do that right now? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's great to see all of the new consumer products coming out in blockchain, ways to earn points and rewards in Bitcoin, or use a Bitcoin ATM card. Some of the new DeFi solutions that may allow you to get a loan with less collateral. So yeah, really excited about becoming our own bank. I think that has the biggest potential, right, to disrupt the current systems that we're in, since money is part of what governs our politics and our education and everything. So thank you so much, Gilberto, for coming on. Northwestern University Blockchain Club, going virtual, some people going back to school, working on awesome projects around supply chain and project management. for clinical research. Anywhere you want to plug that people can find you or learn more about any of your projects or the club?
Yeah. So just on Facebook, our Facebook page is NU Blockchain Group. So if you check us out on there, you'll be able to see some more updates and stay up to date with our events.
Thank you so much, Gilberto. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be back with more from Reimagine 2020.